is sunshine in my soul today, more glorious and bright than closing in earthly sky. For Jesus is the light. There's sunshine, blessed sunshine, where the peaceful, happy moments roll. When Jesus shows his smiling face, there's sunshine in my soul. There is springtime in my soul today, for when my Lord is near, the dove of peace sings in my heart, the flowers of grace appear. There's sunshine, blessed sunshine, where the peaceful, happy moments roll. When Jesus shows his smiling face, there's sunshine in my soul.
The first Oregon Peace Pilgrimage by bus brought together Quakers, Mennonites, and Church of the Brethren members for a day of fun, discussion, singing, and celebration of their common heritage as historic peace churches. It was also a day of observing the 500th anniversary of Anabaptism. Beginning at the Reedwood Friends Church in Portland, Oregon, Daniel Smith Christopher, professor of Theological Studies at Loyola Marymount University in LA, discussed the history of Anabaptism, which led to the persecutions of thousands of believers. Hello, I'm Brent Carlson. Welcome to Brethren Voices. We are pleased to have the opportunity to speak with Daniel Smith Christopher with us today for what is actually part 2 of that interesting bus tour which we featured in our September 2025 edition of Brethren Voices. So first, Daniel, let me welcome you to Brethren Voices. It's so great to see you and to have you with us. Daniel, you're a professor of Theological Studies at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. And I understand there's lots of Loyola universities around the country. But it sounds like you've got a long commute because you live part-time in Portland, Oregon.
That's a recent development. But yes, I've been 35 plus years teaching mainly Old Testament studies at Loyola Marymount. And it's been wonderful being a lifelong Quaker, working for the Jesuits and the Marymount Sisters and the Sisters of Orange at Loyola Marymount. So all the Loyola schools are Jesuit.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so all the Loyola Chicago, Loyola New Orleans, Loyola Baltimore, they're all sort of our sister schools.
Okay. Well, what in the world led you, are you a lifelong Quaker?
I am.
What
yes,
What led you to theological studies and a professorship at Loyola Marymount? I may not be able to say that every time. Loyola Marymount University in LA.
Yes. Well, I grew up in Portland and grew up in the Quaker movement. And in fact, in the same meeting my entire life, and my family were all involved. And when I went to George Fox College in Newburgh, decided that I would like to be a minister. And what I was really interested was to become a Quaker minister and to return to Portland. And I was particularly concerned to try and be part of an integrated Quaker church. I was very concerned about race relations and believed passionately in the importance of that. And so when I made a decision to go to seminary, the decision came down to Princeton or a small Mennonite seminary in Elkhart, Indiana, that I had only heard of because of a conversation with a Mennonite pastor at Portland Mennonite Church. And he said, well, Daniel, if you're so impressed with Anabaptism, which I certainly was while I was in college, I was deeply moved by the Anabaptist movement. Walter Clawson's book, Anabaptism, Neither Catholic or Protestant, made a huge impact on me. I never looked back.
Really?
It was absolutely wonderful 3 years. and I felt warmly embraced by my Mennonite brothers and sisters, and I have felt close to the Anabaptist movement ever since.
Fascinating. One of those little divine arrangements, and that hooked you, and you got a thread that
Yes.
led you to where we are now. Absolutely amazing.
And I should say that part of that Anabaptist influence included the Church of the Brethren. I was influenced by Art Gish in his writing. I was influenced in high school by Bernard Eller, particularly his book, His End Up, which for a high school kid, that was a very important book for me. And then it turned out that my roommate at George Fox was from Peace Church of the Brethren. So I actually attended some of the love feasts at Peace Church with my roommate, Bruce Timmons.
I know Bruce Timmons.
Yep, from George Fox. So the connections all started adding up between Daniel's Quakerism and his Anabaptist friends and family.
Wonderful. Wonderful. It's a small world.
It is.
Being a professor at a university probably leads you to connection with people from all over the world with different kinds of beliefs, different kinds of understandings, different kinds of ideas. What is it like to be in that setting from your perspective, and how do you deal with that ecumenism?
Well, the question about the diversity at Loyola Marymount is actually a very interesting question. For one thing, at the beginning of each of my classes, I normally teach many sections of Introduction to the Old Testament. That's sort of my bread and butter course. And at the beginning of that course, I always introduce myself as a Quaker, and I say two things to them. The only influence this is going to have on the course that you may notice is, first of all, I invite you to address me simply as Daniel. It's a Quaker witness to not use titles like professor or doctor. So my students learn quickly to just refer to Daniel. But the second thing is a little more serious. I tell them that I am interested in issues of peace and justice, particularly as it relates to biblical studies. So you'll hear me emphasize those issues. But the nice thing is that's quite compatible with the Jesuits. The Jesuits share those interests in particularly justice issues. And I have many dear friends now who are Jesuits and with whom I have enjoyed not just a friendship, but sharing profound insights and ideas. So I'm very grateful for my experience with the Jesuits.
This is opening up a whole new area for me that I have never had a chance to talk to somebody about. But what, as a professor of theology, do you deal with different kinds of religions, from Buddhism and Christianity and Catholicism and Judaism and maybe some of the other Muslim and other kinds of things? Do you teach about those things or invite conversations about those different beliefs?
At Loyola Marymount, there has been quite an interesting evolution in the Department of Theology. When I started over 35 years ago at Loyola Marymount, it was a fairly traditional Department of Theology at a Roman Catholic university. So I did Old Testament. There was a Presbyterian professor of New Testament. We had one professor who was a specialist in Indian religions. As a matter of fact, he was a brother Quaker from New York. And most of the other faculty were systematic theologians, interested in one aspect of Catholic theology or another. But over the years, the department has evolved significantly towards interfaith emphasis. So we have now 2 fine Muslim faculty members. We have a specialist in Buddhism. We still have our friend who teaches in Indian religions. We have a systematic theologian who does comparative work between Indian religions and Christianity. That's Dr. Tracy T. So it's quite a diverse faculty now, and we most certainly do include discussion across a variety of religious traditions.
Tell us in a nutshell, what is Anabaptism? And where did it originate, and what does it mean?
The interesting thing about Anabaptism is that it begins very early in the Protestant Reformation. I mean, Martin Luther is nailing his 95 Theses on the wall of the Wittenberg church in 1517. Well, the Anabaptist movement was arising not just a few years later. So already in 1525, Conrad Grebel, one of the great founders of the Anabaptist movement in Zurich, in Switzerland, was baptizing fellow adults who had decided to join the Anabaptist movement, which was based largely around, frankly, a very simple idea. And the very simple idea is, we've got the teachings of Jesus, we've got the Sermon on the Mount, why aren't we working harder to try to live like this? For me, that's a profoundly wonderful question, and it's a very challenging one. And it's terribly sad for me to look back on the fact that these people, many of whom lost their lives, but they went through such horrendous treatment simply trying to ask the question, how can we better follow the teachings of Jesus and to live the example that he gave us?
Do you remember how the Church of the Brethren began?
Yes. The Church of the Brethren arises at the beginning of the 18th century. Already by 1708, the Church of the Brethren leaders, Alexander Mack and his followers, were baptizing each other by the Eder River in Schwarzenau in Westphalia in Germany. And what's interesting to me about the Church of the Brethren movement is that they were able to combine some of the profound insights that had already been over 100 years old in Anabaptism, but they combined that with their interest in German pietism, that interesting movement in Germany of people wanting to turn inward for a more spiritually enlightening experience of their faith, because both Catholicism and Protestantism, for many Northern Europeans, was a little cold. It was just sort of theologically important and significant, but very cerebral and not very heart-oriented. And so pietism tried to speak to that. And I find it interesting that the Church of the Brethren tried to combine that. And I think I see elements of that combination in the unique Brethren Love Feast, which I think is a wonderful interpretation of the Eucharist.
Tell us about the beginning of the Mennonite Church.
The Mennonites come out of that Anabaptist movement, of course. When we get to the Netherlands, we have a young priest who has converted by the name of Menno Simons, and his influence, he was a singularly important influence on that branch of the Anabaptist movement. So important, of course, that that movement took the name for Menno Simons and became Mennonite. So it's interesting to me how influential former Catholic priests were on the Anabaptist movement. Clearly they heard something that was unique and powerful that attracted them to this, again, very simple question: how can we better be obedient and in discipleship to Jesus? But that's, for me, that was one of the most compelling questions about Anabaptism, was its laser-like focus on the Sermon on the Mount and saying, we need to take this seriously. And how do we take this seriously? Now, we all make mistakes in doing it. We all fail, but at least that's asking the right question. How do we do this? And that should guide our conversation and our lives and our worship. And I am deeply grateful to Anabaptism for teaching me this.
So I did not know that the Mennonite Church was started by a man who was a Catholic priest.
Yes.
And when you say converted, what did he convert to?
Basically, he was so convinced of the spark of what this Anabaptist movement was when it started in Zurich, right? The earliest Anabaptist leaders like Conrad Grebel were part of Ulrich Zwingli's movement in Zurich, but they didn't believe he went far enough. They thought that he didn't have quite the courage to take the full reforming steps that they believed Christianity should take. And of course, they paid a horrendous price for this. Many of the early Anabaptist leaders, including people like Felix Manz, were martyred. And martyrdom became such a horrific commonality in Anabaptist tradition that by 1660, that great book, Martyr's Mirror, was composed. And you know, that I was told in seminary that Martyr's Mirror sits on the shelf next to the Bible in many Anabaptist, Amish, Mennonite homes across the world.
Tell us about the Quakers.
Quakers, of course, quite different in the sense that they are a British movement. And George Fox is considered the founder, along with his eventual wife, Margaret Fell. And Fox was born in 1624 in a place called Fenny Drayton. And it's normally considered to be in the 1640s and 50s that Quakerism really gets going. It was a time of great turbulence in Britain. 1649 is when the parliamentary forces beheaded Charles I. And it was, of course, a huge transformation. Oliver Cromwell takes over, becomes the protector. And it appears that Fox was so well known as a preacher, as the founder of the Quakers, that Oliver Cromwell wanted him to join his military as a military leader. And Fox, of course, famously declined, because already in the earliest generation of Quakerism, nonviolence, pacifism, was beginning to solidify in the early witness. Now, we had some early Quakers who were a little dodgier on their commitment to nonviolence, but it eventually, within the lifetime of the earliest leaders, it eventually became the witness of the Quaker movement. There's all kinds of discussions and debates about whether Anabaptist ideas from over 100 years before filtered their way into Britain and influenced some of the earliest Quakers. I've not seen it demonstrated convincingly, but I wouldn't be surprised, because there are some strikingly similar ideas. What I think was different was probably Fox's unusual emphasis on the presence of Christ with us now. Fox referred to Jesus as our present teacher. And it's a phrase I like to use a lot, to refer to Jesus as our present teacher, because his emphasis, and the early Quaker emphasis, was on the fact that in our worship, we should be conscious of the fact that we are not doing symbolic things to remember Jesus, but that Jesus is present with us. Therefore, let's open ourselves in quiet and listen for the presence of Jesus, listen for the presence of the Holy Spirit. And that emphasis on listening and quiet was one of the unique aspects of the Quaker movement. But it's absolutely compatible, in my opinion, with the emphasis on discipleship that is more common in Anabaptist thought. But we share so much that I think that it's arguably the case that theologically we are family, and that we have a lot to share with each other and a lot to learn from each other. And especially in difficult days, I think there's a sense that we need each other, that we need to encourage one another, because there have been times when the road we follow, the path we try and trod as historic peace churches, has been difficult. And I think that those times are when we most need to work together. There have been times in history where our traditions have worked together more closely. During World War I and World War II, we worked closely together. These are difficult times again. I think maybe it's time for us to work closely together again.
When we talk about the tour, and you were talking about that, it was a fulfillment of a dream you'd had for a long, long time. How did we ended up at the Brigattine Monastery near Amity, which was our first stop?
Yes.
A delightful time, and you just really did something special to treat us to that place. But how did that get on the schedule?
Well, when I was thinking about this bus trip of bringing together Dunkers and Quakers and Anabaptists, I was thinking, well, what are some of the things that we share? And interestingly enough, it occurred to me, well, one of the things we certainly share is chocolate. especially with the life of Milton Hershey, whose mother was a devoted Mennonite. There's some question about how devoted was Milton Hershey to his Mennonite tradition, but he did live, I think, a very honorable life. So it's present in the Anabaptist tradition. And then, of course, there's the Cadburys and the Frys and the Rowntrees in the Quaker tradition. Those were all chocolate makers in Britain, particularly the Cadburys. And so we use that wonderful stop to sample the chocolates from the Brigattine Monastery to think about the role of chocolate in our histories. And so with each stop, the idea was these might not be a Quaker or Mennonite or Brethren site specifically, but there's something about this place that's not only enjoyable, but it reminds us of an important part of our identity and our heritage together as well. And I think that was one of them.
So from there, we went to Aurora, Oregon, and home of the Aurora Colony, or the old Aurora Colony Museum. Tell us about how that got on the tour.
So one of the most important elements about the Aurora location, of course, is the remains of this wonderful communitarian experiment led by Dr. William Kyle. In the 1850s, Dr. Kyle moved his communal experiment out from Missouri. Some were left in Missouri, but a large number of the community came by covered wagon to Oregon in the 1850s and founded that community in Oregon. They were guided by Dr. Kyle's principles. And I have to share with you again the wonderful principle that Dr. Kyle appears to have invented, which he called the diamond rule. He wanted to contrast it and add it to the golden rule that we're familiar with. For Dr. Kyle, the diamond rule was, in honor, prefer one another. And this idea of a community where you look to take care of each other.
It was really a step back in time to see the buildings and the tools and the workshop and the things that they made and manufactured, and some perhaps they bought, but that this was a way of life more than 150 years ago.
Yes.
It was very interesting. Well, let's talk about the Mennonite church, Zion Mennonite, and you mentioned a little bit about how you were intrigued by that when you first saw it.
Zion Mennonite Church turned out to be a wonderful place to finish the day's peace pilgrimage. For one thing, it's a beautiful location in the Oregon countryside. And for another, there's this wonderful barn, which, according to the literature I was reading, is an Amish-built barn. Now it's used for storing relief materials for Mennonite Central Committee. So there's a wonderful use that's being put to this barn, but just its presence, I think, is a wonderful reminder of community. It's a wonderful reminder of the rural traditions that are a part of the Mennonite heritage and history. And of course, Zion Church has just finished this beautiful outdoor area with a roof covering that was just ideal for a kind of picnic around tables where we were able to sing songs together and finish our day. And they were wonderful hosts. It worked out very well.
I don't want to forget the archives there, because the archives are collections of things from all over the Northwest.
Yes, right across from the barn, here's this incredibly historically significant archive that, as you say, has gathered important materials, particularly about Northwest Anabaptists and Mennonites, for quite some time, and they take such good care of it. It's a really devoted staff.
Well, one person once said, it's easy to speak out when you're not risking anything. But now, as we're seeing recently, the risk of speaking out could become challenging.
Yes.
Where do you think, or what can we do, or what do you hope to see with the Anabaptist and the Peace Church movement, and what do you think we could be or should be doing together?
I think two things come to mind immediately when I think about how do we, as Christians who are interested in what Anabaptists have recently called radical discipleship, I like that phrase. One of the statements of faith for the Mennonite seminary that I went to in Elkhart. The statement of faith says that our commitment to Jesus should express itself in, and the phrase is, active nonconformity to the world as it is. I love that phrase. It's one of the things that most struck me about that page in the seminary bulletin. And I think that there's a challenge that we face in living lives in active nonconformity to the kind of hatreds, the kind of greed, the kinds of resentments that are now being practiced even by political leaders. So one of the things that I think we need to do is to remind ourselves of who we are. And that was one task, I think, of this bus pilgrimage, was to think about history just to remind ourselves who we are, where our spiritual ancestors have been and what they've gone through to bring us to this place. That's the first thing. And the second thing is to realize we have resources even beyond our own fellowship, people who are waiting and ready to encourage us, to say, we're with you, brother, we're with you, sister. Be strong. Be strong in the presence of our present teacher, and we stand with you. I think that can be very encouraging, and I think in these times we really need each other.
Daniel, Smith, Christopher, thank you for the idea and the planning and carrying out the Oregon bus tour and peace pilgrimage this summer with Mennonites and Quakers and Church of the Brethren. We're very grateful that you did this, and thank you for being with us in Brethren Voices.
Thank you. My pleasure.
This is Brent Carlson.
And this is Daniel Smith Christopher.
Wishing you peace.
Pass it on.
There is music in my soul today, a carol to my King, and Jesus listening can hear the songs I just can't sing. There's sunshine, blessed sunshine, where the peaceful happy moments roll. When Jesus shows his smiling face, there is sunshine.